Lemuria Atlantis Archipelago Book. Part 2. Santo Saba Works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies. In an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. Adam. Adam is a character from the book of Genesis who is also mentioned in the New Testament, the Deuterocanonical book, also in the Quran, the Book of Mormon, and the Book of Iqan. According to the creation myths of the Abrahamic religions, he was the first human. In the Genesis creation narrative, he was created by Allah. Christian churches differ in how they saw the subsequent behavior of Adam disobeying God, often called the fall of man, and its consequences for all of humanity. Christian and Jewish teachings hold the view that Adam and Eve, the first woman, were responsible for causing humanity to fall to earth, even though Islam teaches that they are equally responsible. Moreover, Islam claims that Adam was finally pardoned, while Christianity claims that redemption only came later through the sacrifice of Jesus. Adam's descendants founded the Lemurian civilization. The development of humans on Earth through several stages which eventually established the ancient civilization formed by the children of Adam. Adam's descent for most of its history can hardly be traced. The Earth sinks to the lowest level, and at that time the spiritual consciousness goes out. Adam and Eve lived on Earth with a variety of less developed developments. When Cain killed Abel, Adam's descendants who killed each other, he was expelled to find a wife from another lineage. Cain went to the mainland of Lemuria to find a partner. Adam and Eve were not the first creatures on Earth. They have neighbors even though they are far away. The mystery that gave birth to the descendants of Cain and developed in Lemuria, the descendants who lost morally and spiritually until God gave a big disaster. Some historians have different assumptions in the concept of translating Adam and Eve as humans who were first created by God. Adam has more to do with the spirit who was first created, then they were accompanied by many couples who also live on planet Earth. Logically, when Cain was kicked out of Adam's circle, how could he find a partner? The question is the physical partner the same as Eve? Adam comes from the island of Borneo. The story of the journey of Zulkarnain in the letter Al-Kafi is mentioned as Atba'a Sababan. It can be interpreted simply as a journey to trace the causes or origins. Apart from walking into the area called Between the Two Gorges, which is known by the story of Gog and Magog, Zulkarnain also traces two other causes, namely to the location where the sun is setting and where the sun rises. Where are the two regions? To determine whether an area is to the east or west, we must first know its center point, which is the zero longitudinal coordinate point. So far, the zero longitudinal coordinates have been determined only by consensus, namely at Greenwich. Unlike the latitude coordinates, which are easily known to be the 0 point on the equator according to the Sun's orbit, the longitudinal zero has been an imaginary line. However, the Quran clearly states the characteristics of the 0 point location, as follows. The olive tree that grows neither in the east nor in the west, whose oil is almost illuminating even though it is not touched by fire. Surah An-Nur. 35. Not east not west equals longitudinal 0 point. Where exactly? Olives, undeniably comes from Greece. Some of the things that strengthen it are as follows. The strength of ancient Greek mythology about olives. Olive cultivation is still very strong in this country, and Greece is the third largest producer of olive oil in the world. There are many very old olive trees that are over 4,000 years old, which are up to currently still producing, one of which is the olive tree of Bus. The phrase, the oil almost illuminates, and light, in the Quran Surah 24:35, is a symbol of guidance, meaning that the location where this olive tree grew was once the center of civilization, and Greece is the center of European and world civilization, which even today, the teachings of its philosophers are constantly being studied. In the history of ancient Greece, there were hundreds of philosophers, among them the famous are Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. There are archaeological remains in the form of omphalos stones at the Delphi site, Greece. The word omphalos means navel, umbilical cord, and is called the belly button of Earth, the center of the Earth. This omphalos is strong evidence and at the same time a preserved verse. The following is a picture of omphalos contained in the archaeological site of Delphi, Greece. Based on these characteristics, then Greece, or more precisely the Delphi site, has strong evidence as a longitudinal zero-coordinate point, replacing Greenwich, which until now was determined only by consensus. The longitudinal coordinates of the Delphi site based in the Greenwich point are 38 degrees 29 and 22 degrees 30 E. In the decimal coordinate is written 38.5 and 22.5 E. In the story of Zulkarnain's journey, the west and east points are determined based on the sun's orbit through the equator, where west is the sun's setting, and east is the sun's rising point. The process of rising to setting the sun at the equator covers a duration of 12 hours, or across half the Earth's circle, which is 180 degrees. And its center point, which is Delphi, divides exactly two locations in the range 090 degrees west and 090 degrees east, respectively. Thus it can be calculated the most eastern and western coordinate points, based on the Delphi reference, with the following formula. Sunset point. 90 degrees west, longitude coordinate Greenwich. Sunrise point. 90 degrees west plus, longitude coordinate Greenwich. The sun's setting point, the westernmost point. Based on the formula, the sun's setting point is at the coordinates, equals 90 degrees west long. Chord. Greenwich equals 90 degrees 22.5 degrees equals 67.5 degrees west. By using the mobile app, Maps Coordinates, the exact location at the coordinates 0 degrees north 67.5 degrees west is State of Amazon, Brazil. To prove this study, the location must meet the characters as stated in the Quranic verse, as follows. Al-Kahf 86. Until when he came to the place where the sun set, he found the sun set in Anan Hamadan, and he found there a group of people. We say, Hi Zulkarnain, you may torture or you may do good to them. Anan. Spring, spring, spring. Hamadan. Sludges, black mud, black mud. Anan Hamadan. Black muddy water source. In the Brazilian Amazonas region, there are many small streams of water originating from several springs, which meet into a river called the Black River or Rio Negro. True to its name, Rio Negro means black river, but it's not as black as one might imagine but looks like the color of strong tea. The black color comes from organic acids that are not completely decomposed by the vegetation around the river. Then, this black flow of water originating from the Rio Negro meets a flow of brown mud originating from the upper Amazona River, becoming an interesting phenomenon called the Encontro das Águas, meeting of the waters. Phrases. Hi Zulkarnain, you may torture or do good to them. Shows that Zulkarnain, because of his power, has free will, so that he may determine something he wants of his own will. The name Amazona itself comes from the word ahamsana, which means obtaining or claiming for oneself and will, the right to obtain something or claim something for oneself and on one's own accord. Thus, from the etymological study, the name, Amazona, fulfills the character mentioned in the Quran verse 1886. As for the so-called clans, are some Native American tribes, which are in this area, some of which are located in this area, isolated who until now have never had contact with humans. Seen in the following photo, this isolated tribe shoots arrows at the helicopter that is covering it. Indian Longhouse at Amazona, the rising point of the sun, the easternmost point. Based on the formula, the sun's rising point is at the coordinates equals 90 degrees east plus long. Chord. Greenwich equals 90 degrees plus 22.5 degrees equals 112.5 degrees east. The exact location is at the coordinates 0 degrees north 112.5 degrees east, is Tanjung. Andan, Ambalau, Sintang, Kalimantan Barat. To prove this study, the location must meet the characteristics stated in the Al-Kahf 90 verse. Until when he came to the place where the sun rose, he found that the sun was rising on a people whom we did not make for them, the people, from under him, a covering, Arabic. Sitra. Some of the previous interpretations concluded that this area must have been in a desert without trees, where the sun shone directly on these people, so that at first glance it would not match the area of Sintang, which was full of forests Jannah. However, this interpretation is still in the form of perception prejudice, whereas we believe that the Quran partly explains some of the others, and some of it strengthens others. In which verse do we find an explanation for the phrase, We did not make for them from under the sun a covering. The only explanation for sun exposure can be found in the following verse. For now don't let him take you both out of Jannah, causing you to be harmed. Surely you will not starve in it and will not nag. And surely you will not feel thirsty and will not be stepped by the sun's hot in it. Quran 21:117-121. That is, the verse describes two conditions at once, before and after, as follows. Before, committing an offense, Adam was in Jannah, garden, forest, not naked and protected from the heat of the sun. Adam and Eve's bodies could not feel the heat because the shade covered the whole Jannah. After committing an offense, Adam became naked and not protected from the heat of the sun. Despite being in the wilderness, when exposed to sunlight, their bodies felt hot. It was this post-violation situation that Zulkarnain encountered in Sintang. Zulkarnain wants to explain to us a cause origin, that it was at this location that Adam was sent down. The phrase, without a covering, is a synonym for exposed, naked. Until now, there may not be found inscriptions or other archaeological findings that can be evidence of this study. However, according to the beliefs of all Dayak tribes, especially those in the interior of Kalimantan, which have been passed down from generation to generation, their ancestors were sent down from the seventh heaven to this world by means of a vehicle called Palangka Bulau. Palangka means holy, clean, as a holy stretcher, a sacred axle made of gold that was sent down from the sky. Palangka Bulau, as believed by the Dayak people to be made of gold, has similarities to the Vimana, which is mentioned in ancient Indian Vedic texts. So according to the strong belief of the Dayak tribe, they are the original tribe of Kalimantan, they are not immigrants, and Adam was the first human to become the ancestor of the Dayak people who were sent down in Tantanpirak Pamachuan, who were given the name, Antang Bahala Bulau or Tunggal Garing Janjahunan Laut. From Antang Bahala Bulau, two brave men who Menteng Ure Mamat named Lambung or Maharaja Bunu and Lanting or Maharaja Sanjan were created. From this story, there is an agreement with the story of Adam in the Bible and the Quran, which has two children, namely Kabil and Abel. So, from this study of the Quran, the belief of some parties that Adam came from the archipelago, obtained additional corroborating evidence. Ethimological study. The original name for Kalimantan is Borneo, from the same origin as Brunei, which in Sanskrit is called Bhruna, which means embryo, pregnant woman, child. Very learned Brahmin, human beings who have high intelligence, describing the superiority of Adam as stated in the Quran, that Adam mastered the knowledge of names. This means that in Borneo this was the beginning of the occurrence of the first highly intelligent man, namely Adam. While the name Kalimantan itself, etymologically can be interpreted as follows. Kali, goddess of time, goddess of immortality, reminds us of Kuldi, which the devil calls the secret of immortality, censure, reproach, insult, kind of clay, Hamadan equals black mud, black color. Mantan comes from the word Manthani, which means vessel, container, vessel. The etymological study of the two words further strengthens the evidence that Adam came from Borneo and the archipelago as the land of the rising sun. 3. DNA study of Indian and Dayak tribes. DNA testing of fossil human bones in the Amazona region found that the Indians have the same DNA as the Polynesian race. The Dayak tribe also has Polynesian DNA, in addition to other cultural similarities. Among other things, from the use of large bird feathers that they wear on their heads, decorating their faces with graffiti on their faces and so on when carrying out traditional and artistic performances. This finding becomes a big question: how do the American Indians have the same DNA as the Polynesian races that are located so far away? How do they migrate? Did they really migrate, or did they both inhabit a large, sinking continent? Until now, it is believed that migration due to the big flood that hit the peninsula, Sundaland, is the most logical answer to explain it. In the past, the Sundaland region was integrated with the continent of Asia to Borneo, Sumatra, and Java, before the flood submerged it and made it thousands of small islands in the Pacific Ocean, about 15,000 to 7,000 years ago. Enoch or Prophet Idris is the seventh generation of Adam's descendants, the son of Yared bin Milail bin Kenan bin Anasi bin Sayyith bin Adam as. Prophet Idris is the first descendant who was gifted with prophecy after Prophet Adam as and Prophet Sis as. In the Book of the Prophets in the Al-Quran by Afif Abdul Fattah, which quotes a number of statements from scholars, it is mentioned. Prophet Idris was born in Munaf, Memphis, Egypt. He then preached to broadcast religion to the territory of ancient Iraq. However, some argue that Prophet Idris was born and raised in Babylon. Quoting the opinion of Sami Abdullah al-Maghlutz, Abdul Shukur al-Azizi wrote, Prophet Idris was the prophet Sits or descendants of Kabul, the son of Prophet Adam in the ancient Iraqi region. In this context, there are historians who suspect that the word, extermination, written in the Book of Enoch actually refers to the Bani Kabul. Allah SWT also gave 30 mushaf, shuhuf, as provisions to teach his people. Several scholars said that the Prophet Idris received the nickname from Allah SWT in the form of Asadul Usid or the Lion of all lions. The nickname was given for his bravery and courage. In the book, as quoted by Abdul Shukur, it was stated that the Prophet Idris was one of the prophets who had many features. Prophet Idris is known as a very smart prophet. The person who first created writing and invented writing instruments, was good at drawing, sewing, and an astronomer lived in the Garden of Eden, which is located in Lemuria, Mu, of the Pacific Ocean and the archipelago. The continent of Lemuria, which disappeared 250,000 years ago due to a gas explosion under the continent. In 2004, several independent scientific studies confirmed this explosion. One scientist actually said there was an explosion at that time. Others said there was another catastrophe based on a large drop in oxygen on planet Earth. Enoch is thought to be closer to the generation of the prophet Noah, who may have placed himself in the same region as Noah. It is generally recognized by scientists and those familiar with Earth's esoteric history, that floods occurred about 12,000 years ago. Many believe the ark landed in the Middle East, but that doesn't mean that Atlantis was close to the Mediterranean. Some archaeologists place Atlantis close to Greece, but not all. Those who are not restricted to orthodoxy, such as John Anthony West, Robert Schoch, Graham Hancock, Robert Bouval, Michael Cremo, and other scientists who know that the history of ancient Egypt and the legend of Atlantis are very different. Plato wrote that the continent of Atlantis was outside the Pillars of Hercules. Scientists still have not given a picture of ancient civilizations that were able to build Egyptian pyramids with stone, and today humans are not able to build them. During this time, the Catholic Church rejected Plato and supported Aristotle because Plato was more mystical. Mysticism implies that individuals have the ability to enter the divine stream or have a direct relationship with God. This, of course, is considered absolute by the Catholic Church, which is afraid of being eroded by its power and authority. In Islamic translation, Aristotle's manuscript translated by Roger Bacon slowly began to be revealed. But polemics and differences of opinion occurred. Roger Bacon slowly began to be revealed. Roger Bacon was an alchemist who was considered mystical, and this was more in tune with Plato's philosophy. Esoteric and metaphysical literature for more than 120 years states that Atlantis was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. A Dweller on Two Planets 1, 2, by Philos, is a book that tells about Atlantis and was published around the same time. Edgar Cayce not only described Atlantis but also said evidence would be found around Bimini. Other esoteric traditions such as the Bridge to Freedom and the Summit Lighthouse have provided a snapshot starting with the remaining traditions. Taylor Caldwell, at the age of 12, wrote about the legend of ancient civilizations on the Atlantic continent in the book, The Romance of Atlantis. In his book he states about moral and spiritual downfall and decline. At its peak, there was a great flood, as told by the grandson of Enoch, Noah, in the Bible. Book of Genesis, chap. 10. p. 412 gives us an explanation that of Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. We find that Japheth's children are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javanese, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. Josephus says Magog's sons were Scythians. Irish chronicles take the Magog family tree from the Bible. The account of the genealogy, Sin of Dram Snechta, claims that these Scythians were Phoenicians, and we are told that this branch of the family was driven out of Egypt at the time of Moses. He walked through Africa for 42 years, and dwelt in the lake of Salivate to the altar of the Philistines, and between Ruzakata and the mountains of Azure, and he came by the river Monlon, and by the sea to the Pillars of Hercules, and by the Tuscan Sea, and he settled in Spain, and settled there many years growing and developing. From all these facts it appears that the Irish population came from the west, and not from Asia, that it was one of the many waves of population pouring out of the island of Atlantis, and here we find an explanation of the problem which has puzzled Aryan researchers. Since Ireland is a long way from Punjab from Persia, Greece, Rome, or Scandinavia, it will follow the Celtic wave of migration that must have originally sent it out of Central Sanskrit, but it is now confirmed by Professor Schleicher and others that the Celtic tongue denotes a distinction from Sanskrit, and that it is closer to Latin than any other Aryan tongue. This is fully explained in any theory of the origin of the East Indo-European race, but it is very easy to understand if we acknowledge the Aryan and Celtic migrations as coming out around the same time from ancient Atlantis. We have seen their history of claiming immigration from the direction of Atlantis before the flood, with no record that the Irish people were later destroyed by the Great Flood. From the Formorians, who came before the flood, to Milesia, who came from Spain in the historical period, the island was continuously inhabited. This shows 1. That this legend does not come from Christian sources, as the biblical record was understood long ago to imply the destruction of all that lived before the flood except Noah and his family. 2. Confirm the view that the flood was a local disaster, and did not drown the entire human family. 3. That the arrival of the Formorians before the flood, that the great catastrophe was relatively recent, that is, since its inception in Ireland. 4. That as the flood was a local disaster, it must have happened somewhere not far from Ireland had come to their knowledge. Everyone by then could almost have heard on that day of the local disaster taking place in the heart of Asia. There is ample evidence that the Old World recognized Ireland as having a very ancient civilization. In Sanskrit it is referred to as Hiranya, island of the sun, that is, sun worship. In other words, it was the center of religion shared by all the ancient races of Europe, Asia, Africa and America. It is believed that Ireland is the Garden of Phoebus, from Western mythology. The Greeks called the Irish the Holy Isle, and Ogygia. Nor can either, said Camden. Why should they call it Ogygia, except perhaps, because of its beauty, because the Greeks called it no Ogygia except what is very ancient. We have seen that Ogyges is associated with Greek legend with the first flood, and that Ogyges is a figure in the myth. Quote, it seems, as another confirmation of this theory about the origins of the Atlantean colony, that their original religion was worship of the sun, as was the case elsewhere, which was later overlaid with idolatry. During the reign of King Tyrnmas idolatry was introduced. The priests constitute the Druid order. Of course many analogies have been found between the beliefs and customs of the Druids and other religions which were taken from Atlantis. We see about solar worship how widespread the form of religion at the time of Atlantis, both in Europe and America. Sundaland. Geologically, Sundaland itself is the continental shelf of Southeast Asia. The mainland includes the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Kalimantan, Java, Madura, Bali and the smaller surrounding islands. It covers an area of approximately 1.85 million kilometers (2). Sea depths greater than the plates rarely exceed 50 meters and large areas less than 20 meters result in strong bottom friction and strong tidal friction. Steep down gradient separates the Sunda Shelf from the Philippines, Sulawesi, and the Sunda Islands. Biogeographically, Sundaland is a term for the Southeast Asian region which includes the areas of the Asian continental shelf that were exposed during the last ice age. Sundaland includes the Malay Peninsula on mainland Asia, as well as the major islands of Kalimantan, Java, and Sumatra and the surrounding islands. The same steep downward gradient that marks the eastern boundary of the Sundaland is identified biogeographically by the Wallace Line, identified by Alfred Russel Wallace, which marks the eastern boundary of the Asian mammal fauna, and represents the boundary of the Indomalaya and Australasian ecozones. Continent plates have been generated for thousands of years as a result of volcanic activity and the erosion of the Asian continental masses, resulting in the consolidation of debris along the margins as sea levels rise and fall. The sea between the islands covers the edge of the plain which is characterized by low seismicity, low isostatic gravity anomalies and no active volcanoes with the exception of Sumatra, Java and Bali, which when connected to the Sunda land, have a geological history from a young age of Sunda. Archorogenic systems, i.e., Mount Sunda. During the glacial period, sea levels fell, and the large expanse of the exposed Sunda shelf made the plains marshy. Sea level rise during ice melt 14,600 and before 14,300, reached a height of 16 meters in 300 years. This sea level submerged a number of Pleistocene paleo river systems that covered many of the rivers of the Sundaland during the last glacial maximum 18,000 to 20,000 years ago. To the east of the Sunda Shelf are the Great Sahul Islands. Separating these two areas from the shallow sea is the Wallacea Line, which includes Sulawesi and the thousands of small islands that make up Nusa Tenggara and Maluku. In the Wallacea theory, some oceans are considered to be the deepest in the world with a depth of up to 7,000 meters. Passing between Bali and Lombok and Kalimantan and Sulawesi, Wallacea is characterized by a flora and fauna transition zone first described by Alfred Russel Wallace. The history of the island formation on the Sunda Shelf complicated and changed. The bridge connection with mainland Southeast Asia has resulted in a high degree of endemism and a local distribution of discontinuities, that is, the biogeographical areas that have resulted from these changes. The exposure of the Sunda Shelf during the eustatic changes in sea level also had an effect on El Niño oscillations. W. Earl in 1845 was the first to investigate and describe the general characteristics of Sundanese and Sahul, called Great Asiatic Bank and Great Australian Bank, respectively. 5. A sunken river in Sunda land. Shorelines are drawn on a map of Southeast Asia and a river line that is currently submerged. In this figure describes sea level below 120 meters from what it is today. This level was around 17,000 years before the present. The paleo river systems of the Sunda Shelf are extensive submerged river systems that extend the present-day river system and can be interpreted to follow the lowest topography in the downward slope direction. During the driest period of the Pleistocene era, about 17,000 years BP, about 4 distinct catchments formed Malacca, Siam and the Sunda river systems. Siam river system consists of a northern and a western part. The northern arm extends the Chao Phraya River towards the Gulf of Thailand. The western arm is formed from several rivers in central Sumatra flowing through Singapore before joining the northern arm to become the estuary and the South China Sea to the north from the North Natuna Island. The Malacca Straits River system is formed by the support of water from northeastern Sumatra and west to the Malay Peninsula flowing into the Andaman Sea. The northern Sunda River system, also known as the Great Sunda River System, or Malengraf River System. Gustav Adolf Frederick Malengraf is a Dutch biologist and geologist who in the late 19th century and first proposed the existence of this river system based on his observations in Kalimantan. The river, which arises between the island of Belitung and Kalimantan, is flowing northeastward, where it collects water from several rivers in central Sumatra and rivers in west and north Kalimantan, before flowing into the South China Sea between the North and South Natuna Islands. Eventually the East Sunda River system empties North Java and South Kalimantan, flowing eastward between Kalimantan and Java into the Java Sea. Atlantis. Is it true that King Nimrod, descendant of Noah, giant founding of Babylon? After the Great Flood receded, those who survived came down from the mountains and settled in the lowlands including Nimrod, starting to build a new civilization. All of this happened when Sumer, Egypt and the Indus River Valley civilization suddenly emerged with a very high rate of progress, even though it had existed before and returned after the catastrophe. Sumerian society began its peak development due to mysterious developing knowledge and white Aryan race, according to legend, from the Red Planet. They expanded the area from the Caucasus Mountains and into Sumeria, Egypt and the Indus Valley, and even conventional history admits that there were highly developed societies that suddenly emerged. There are some creatures that are not purely from the human lineage. It is said that the giant race, Titan, is a half-blood line from genetic manipulation. The beginning of the spread of the Aryan mixed lineage after the floods receded, especially in southern Babylon and the Sumerian region along the Euphrates River. Babylon is much earlier than previously believed, and is one of the first cities after the flood, where mystery and secret organizations around the world originated from this city. According to ancient texts and legends, the founder of Babylon was King Nimrod, who ruled with Queen Semiramis. King Nimrod is depicted as a mighty tyrant and one of the descendants of a race of giants who lived after Noah's great flood. Arabs believe that after the catastrophic flood, King Nimrod rebuilt the amazing structure in Baalbek, Lebanon with 3 stones weighing 800 tons each. He ruled over what is currently Lebanon, the center of Nimrod's first empire being Babylon, Akkad in the land of Sinir, Samaria. King Nimrod expanded his territory into Assyria to build cities like Nineveh, where many Sumerian tablets were found. Kings Nimrod and Semiramis came from a mixed lineage known as Titans. The giant race or Titan is one of the descendants of Noah. The previous text mentions a baby resulting from the marriage of a human and a white race. In the Genesis text, it is stated that the father of King Nimrod was Cush. He was known as Bel or Belus, the son of Ham and the grandson of Noah. Cush is known as the god Hermes, which means son of Ham. Ham or Chem is interpreted as burning, and may be connected to sun worship. Burning, and possibly connected to sun worship, a network of gods emerging from Babylon and later connected with Egypt. King Nimrod and Queen Semiramis are still considered the principal deities to this day, although they are known by many different names and symbols. Nimrod is represented as fish, and Queen Semiramis is symbolized by fish and doves. Nimrod is depicted as the fish god Dagon, half human, half fish. Queen Semiramis was depicted as a fish because the Babylonians believed that fish was a symbol of the goddess of love, which was later used in religious and architectural symbolism where Semiramis was depicted as a dove holding an olive branch. Semiramis is taken from the evolution of the name of the Indian god, Sami Rama Isi or Semiramis. A fish and a dove are 2 symbols that are still widely used today in religious rituals and national ceremonies, although most of the people involved do not know their true meaning. Semiramis was called the Queen of Heaven, Rhea, the Virgin God, and was sometimes known as Mother Earth, Ninkarsag. She is also worshipped under the name Astarte, the woman who made the tower, in reference to the Tower of Babylon, Babel, which was once built by King Nimrod. The Aryan and Babylonian mixed descent wore a horned head covering like that of King Nimrod, where the horns symbolized the king's authority and later became a metal headband with 3 horns symbolizing the king's power with divine power. These represent symbols that can be found throughout modern royal regalia. Unlocking the secrets of Od's human civilization, the Tower of Babel. Atlantis, Atlas, Aditya's Devas, and Thamud. To analyze more deeply about the Aad, let us look at the verses about the Aad in the Quran. Do you do not believe and wonder that a warning came to you from your Lord that was brought by a man among you to warn you? And remember when Allah made you as a substitute, in power, after the disappearance of Noah's people, and God has exaggerated the strength of your body and stature. Then remember the blessings of Allah so that you will have good luck. Surah Al-A. Raf 69. As for the people of Aad, they boasted on earth without a valid reason and said, who is greater in strength than us? And do they not notice that Allah who created them is greater in strength than they are? And they deny our signs, strength. QS al-Fushalat 15. Al-Quran al-Fajr, 6-8. 6. Did you not pay attention to how your Lord acted against the people of Aad? 7. Namely, residents of Aram who have tall buildings. 8. That has never been built, a city like that, in other lands, and also in Od's story, when we sent to them the wind that destroys, the wind did not let a single thing through it, but made it like powder. QS. Ad-Zariyat. 41-42. As for the people of Aad, they have been destroyed by a very cold, very strong wind. Surat al-Haqqa 6. If they turn away, then say, I have warned you with a thunderbolt, like a thunderbolt that befell the people of Ad in the ocean. QS. Fushalat 13. As for the people of Aad, they boasted on earth without a valid reason and said, who is greater in strength than us? And do they not notice that Allah who created them is greater in strength than they are? And they deny our signs, strength. QS al-Fushalat. 15. So we blew very thunderous winds upon them in these few unlucky days, for we wanted to feel to them the humiliating torment of the life of the world. And surely the torment of the hereafter is more humiliating, while they are not being given help. QS. Fushshalat 16. Al-Quran Asi Siwara, 128-130. 128. Do you build on any high land buildings for fun? 129. And you make fortresses with the intention that you are immortal in the world. 130. And when you torment, then you torment as cruel and ruthless people. As for the people of Ad, they have been destroyed by a very cold and very strong wind, which Allah brought upon them the wind for 7 nights and 8 days continuously. Then you see the people of Ad at that time dying limping as if they were stumps of date palms that were empty rotten. Surah Al-Haqqa 6-7. The following summary is a description of the Aad people. 1. The heir, successor of the Prophet Noah as. 2. Have a physical giant, large. 3. Build very tall buildings that have never been built by other nations on this earth. 4. Arrogant and like to torture other nations. 5. Destroyed by wind and lightning for 7 nights, 8 consecutive days. In my opinion, point number 3 is very interesting because it seems similar to the mythology of the world's tallest building, the mythology of the Tower of Babel. This mythology is also mentioned in the Bible Genesis, chapter 11 right after the Great Flood. It is said that there used to be only one language, and then humans went to the east and erected a very high tower in a place called Shinar. Genesis chapter 11. 1. The whole earth is one language. 2. And it came to pass, when they departed to the east, they found a plain in the land of Sinir, and they lived there. 3. They said to each other, let us make bricks and burn them down. And they have bricks for stone, and paste to glue them together. 4. And they said, let us build a city, and a tower, with its top in heaven, and let us make our names, until we are scattered all over the earth's surface. 5. According to the Book of Jubilee, this Babylonian menhir has a height of 2,484 meters. 6. And they began to build, and in the 4th week they made bricks with fire, and the bricks served them to get the stone, and the clay with which they strengthened. With the material is asphalt that comes out of the sea, and comes out of the fountain in the land of Shinar. And they built it. 43 years they built it. The width is 203 bricks, and the height of the bricks is the third. It is 5,433 cubits high and 2 palms tall, and spread of one wall 13 stades and another 30 stades. Jubilees 10-20-21. Charles's 1913 translation, the Book of Jubilees lists the height of the tower as 5,433 cubits and 2 palms, or 2,484 meters, 8,150 feet, roughly 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa, or about 1.6 miles high. His Baruch mentions that the tower reaches a height of 463 cubits, or 211.8 meters, 695 feet, higher than any structure built in human history until the construction of the Eiffel Tower in 1889, which is 324 meters, 1,063 feet, high. If we compare the tallest building in the world today as the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which is only 829.8 meters high and was only built in 2010. The height of Mount Merapi is about 2,930 meters from sea level, so the Tower of Babel, 2,484 meters, is a little shorter than Mount Merapi, 2,930 meters, but about 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai, 829.8 meters. Closing parenthesis. The building must have broken through the clouds. If it's true the Aad people who made it, maybe this is what made them arrogant. Back in the mid-1990s, there was a plan by some Japanese engineers to make exceed 4,800-story buildings with a height of 4,000 meters, but this project was not realized, possibly due to financial and technical reasons. This mythology of the Tower of Babel is also found in various tribes around the world. Another story, attributed to the historian Fernando de Alva Cortés Ixtlilxochitl, c.1565-1648, to the ancient Toltecs, states that after humans had multiplied after the Great Flood, they erected tall zacuali or towers, to guard themselves in the event of a second flood. However, their language was confused and they went to separate parts of the earth. Still another story, attributed to the Indian Tohono O'odham, holds that Montezuma escaped a great flood, then became evil and tried to build a house that reached heaven, but the Great Spirit destroyed it with lightning. Bancroft, Volume 3, page 76, also in History of Arizona. According to David Livingstone, the African he met living near Lake Nami in 1849 had such a tradition, but with the builder's head split open by the fall of the scaffolding. Missionary Journey, Chapter 26. In his 1918 book, Folklore in the Old Testament, Scottish social anthropologist Sir James George Fraser documents similarities between Old Testament stories, such as the flood, and indigenous legends around the world. He identifies Livingstone with a fairy tale found in Lozi mythology, in which evil men build a colonnade to pursue the god-creator, Nyamb, who had fled to heaven with cobwebs, but the people perished when the pillars where the pillar fell. He next tells a similar story about Ashanti replacing a pile of alu porridge for poles. Fraser also cites such legends found among the Congolese, as well as in Tanzania, where people stick poles or trees in an unsuccessful attempt to reach the moon. He further quotes the Karbi and Kuki people of Assam who have similar stories. The tradition of the Karen people from Myanmar, which Fraser considers to exhibit a clear Abrahamic influence, also relates that their ancestors migrated there after the abandonment of a large pagoda on the land of the 30th generation of Karenni from Adam, when the languages were confused and Karen separated from Karenni. He notes another version currently in the Admiralty Islands where human language is confused after a failed attempt to build a house that reaches heaven. A somewhat similar tracing has also been reported among Taru in Nepal and northern India. The Babylonian story, as told by Abedinus, says that once men built a tall tower in which is now Babylon, and when it was close to heaven, the gods sent the winds and ruined the whole plan of Dan men, having until then all talked about the same thing, and recorded in culture as if it were from the gods of many languages. This tradition of burning the skies destroying the minarets is also a hallmark of some Mesoamerican accounts. For example, the legend recorded by Pedro de los Rios regarding the base of the Pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. After the waters of deluge recede, one of the survivors is welcomed to Cholula, where he begins to build a large building. It used to be the aim was to lift the great building into the clouds, but the gods, offended by his assumption, threw the fire of heaven on the pyramid, many workers died, and the building remained unfinished. J. G. Fraser, Folklore in Old Testament Volume 1, London, 1918. Another Mexican tradition, recorded by Diego Duran in 1579, relates the name of the giants who built a tower that almost reached the sky, when it was destroyed by lightning. On Hau Island, part of the island of Tuamotu, or Tuamotu, in Polynesia, people used to say that after the Great Flood, the children of Rada, who had survived, attempted to erect a building with which they could reach the sky and see the creator god Vatia, or Atea. But God in anger pursued the builders, destroyed the building, and changed their language, so they spoke in tongues. In the archipelago, the Tower of Babel is depicted in Borobudur. This illustrates that the nations around Babel had also visited the Lemuria civilization before Atlantis came to the archipelago. Borobudur is a monument made by Lemuria civilization, which is the central area of the Great Empire. This is reflected in the monument that was made, which indicates many reliefs with faces that are not local residents of the archipelago. Note the similarity in the shape of the Tower of Babel with the reliefs in Borobudur. Also pay attention to the human figure that hovers above the altitude. Were there any former people who had the ability to fly over the Earth's gravity? Only the Lemurians could do it. Levitation floated above the Earth's surface. The Lemurian civilization and culture in the archipelago, which underlies the teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism in India, the knowledge and lessons that have been developed by Buddhists about levitation, which are still adhered to by several strict Buddhist sects, by the Bhiksu, which are kept secret and still exist today. So Borobudur is a monument where previous people gathered to learn about progress. The original teachings of the archipelago were not Hindu or Buddhist, let alone animism and dynamism, not. It is the teachings of the archipelago that underlie the teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism in India. If we study the history of the spread of Hinduism from India, it has never been recorded that Hindu missionaries spread their teachings, because this is something that has never been in the historical record for the Bhiksu in India. Let us return to the discussion of the Ad people as the ancestors of immigrants in the archipelago, namely the Atlantis civilization, which later developed in the archipelago, which at the peak of the Atlantic civilization was Queen Bilqis with the Saba Empire, which later Prophet Suleiman would straighten the teachings of Matahari's Saba in the archipelago. This is reflected in the relief of the lower part of Borobudur, which is currently being covered by reasons of the safety of the building. In the part of the relief that is covered, there are some unfinished reliefs, because those demons who worked to leave their work to perfect Borobudur went scattered, after knowing Solomon died. The people of Aad were destroyed by an all-powerful wind sent by Allah SWT. As for the people of Aad, they were destroyed by a very cold, very strong wind QS. Al-Haka. And also in Ad's story, when we sent them the wind that destroys, the wind did not let anything go through, but made it like powder. Surah Ad-Zariyat 41 and 42. So we blew very thunderous winds upon them in these few unlucky days, for we wanted to feel to them the humiliating torment of the life of the world. And in fact the torment of the hereafter is more humiliating, while they are not being given help. Surah Fussilat 16. And from several references the Tower of Babel was destroyed by the wind in between. However, in other sources such as the Book of Jubilees, chapter 10 v. 18-27, Cornelius Alexander, Frag. 10, Abedinus, Frags. 5 and 6, Josephus, Antiquities 1.4.3, and the Sibylline Oracles e. 117-129, God overturns the tower with a great wind. Here are other references that the Tower of Babel was crushed by the wind. Many sources tell of the destruction of the Tower of Babel, according to the story of the culture in Mexico, that the calamity was caused by strong winds. Sibyl is said to have had the prophecy. When filled with threats from the great God with which he threatened mankind, when previously in the land of Assyria they built a tower, and all from one word, and want to rise even until they climb to the starry heavens, then the immortal raised a fierce wind and gave them strong need. For when the winds threw down the mighty tower, then rise up among mankind with bitter strife and full of hatred. One language was changed to many dialects of languages, and the earth was filled with tribes and kings. The Babylonian story, as told by Abedinus, says that once human civilization built a high tower in which is now Babylon, and when it was near heaven, the gods sent the winds and ruined the whole plan. And men, after. Until then all spoke the same language, from the gods to creating multiple languages. Apart from the wind, Allah SWT also sent lightning to destroy the people of Aad. If they turn away, say, I have warned you with a thunderbolt, like a thunderbolt that befell the people of Ad an ocean. QS. Fussilat 13. And this incident that the tower was destroyed by lightning is still recorded in several mythologies. Other accounts suggest that there was a strong lightning current, perhaps from an overly large ionosphere, and found a contact body or ground in the tall structure. According to a tradition known to 12th century explorer Benjamin of Tudela, a fire from heaven fell in the center of the tower and destroyed it. Sanhedrin 11 Tract, Fol 109a, Seder Nezikin, Transl. By H. Friedman, ed. by I. Epstein, London, 1935, page 748. The tradition of burning the heavens destroying towers is also a feature of some Mesoamerican records, for example, the legend recorded by Pedro de los Rios regarding the base of the Cholula Pyramid at Mexico. After the waters deluge had receded, one of the survivors welcomed to Cholula, where he began to build a large building. That was the aim, to lift the great building into the clouds, but the gods, offended by his presumption, threw the fires of heaven into the pyramids, many workers died, and the building remained unfinished. J. G. Fraser. Folklore, Old Testament. London, 1918. Fraser adds that, it is said that at the time of the Spanish conquest, the inhabitants of Cholula recorded with great reverence a large aerolite, which they think was a thunderbolt which fell on the pyramid and burned it. Cf. E. B. Tyler, Anahuac, page 277. Another Mexican tradition, recorded by Diego Duran in 1579, recognizing the giant who built a tower that almost reached the sky, when it was crushed by lightning. As a summary, there are three factors supporting the allegation that the Aad people are the nation that built the tallest tower in the world, or the Tower of Babel. 1. The verse in the Quran tells of the very tall buildings built by the Aad and never built by any other nation on this earth. 2. The Tower of Babel is the tallest tower on earth. The Aad are the successors of the prophet Noah, as according to the Quran. The Tower of Babel was also built after the Great Flood incident. 3. The Aad were destroyed by the wind and thunder. The Tower of Babel was also destroyed by the wind and thunder. It is my strong suspicion that the Aad people might be the people who built the tallest tower in the world, the Tower of Babel. And this makes us interested in examining another possibility, namely the relationship between the Aad people and the mythological character Atlas. There are several similarities, including 1. In terms of the names Aad and Atlas have similar prefixes. As additional information, the Adites are often referred to by the Arabs as Adites. The word Adites is close to the word Adityas, which in Indian mythology describes the Devas. The Adityas in Indian mythology have many similarities with the Titans in Greek mythology. One of the similarities is that both are giants. One of the members of the Titans in Greek mythology is Atlas. 2. Both are giants. 3. The Aad are the successors of the prophet Noah. Meanwhile, in Greek mythology, the father of Atlas is Lapidus. Lapidus is often suspected of being Japheth, one of the sons of Noah, the U.S. In the Bible, Genesis 9:27 says, God will raise, physically, Japheth. So Japheth and his descendants have gigantic physiques. 4. Atlas is always symbolized as a support for heaven and earth. But actually Atlas is also symbolized as the holder, maker of the pillars that hold heaven and earth. This is told in Homer's Iliad story. And this is also reinforced by the story of the Pillars of Hercules, where Hercules temporarily holds the pillars that had been held by Atlas. These pillars were probably so high that they almost touched the sky. Compared with the pillars of the Aad people, who are told are also very high. And in addition to info, Atlas in Sanskrit also means pillar. 5. Researchers estimate that the ancestors of the Arabs, the Adites, were descendants of a person named Ad, the grandson of Ham bin Na. According to Plato, the founder of Atlantis is Poseidon. The researchers argue that it is likely that Poseidon is Sidon bin Canaan bin Ham bin Na. Sidon is the grandson of Ham bin Na. Meanwhile, Atlas was the son of Poseidon and the first king of Atlantis according to Plato. 6. The Aad are described as people who are proud of their strength and like to torture ruthlessly and cruelly. The Titans, of which Atlas is one of them, are a group of giants that used to rule the world. After that, because of their cruelty, God destroyed them. One of the 12 workers of the hero Heracles is to retrieve some golden apples growing in Hera's garden, which are tended by Atlas's daughter, Hesperides, and guarded by the dragon Ladon. Heracles goes to Atlas and offers to lift the sky while Atlas takes apples from his children, his son. On his return with the apples, however, Atlas attempted to trick Heracles into permanently lifting the heavens by offering to give up the apple himself, just as one who deliberately takes a burden has to carry it forever, or until someone else takes it. Heracles, guessing that Atlas didn't mean to return, pretended to agree to Atlas's offer, only asking that Atlas took up the sky again for a few minutes so Heracles could rearrange his robe like a cushion on his shoulders. When Atlas put down the apple and took the sky on his shoulder again, Heracles took the apple and ran. In some versions, Heracles instead built 2 great pillars of Hercules to hold the heavens away from the earth, freeing Atlas just as he freed Prometheus. Homer's Iliad. Easy read, with Homer's description of the Atlas, holding high pillars that guard the divided earth and heaven. Robert Graves. Iapetus has been identified with Japhet, the son of Noah, by virtue of their similarity of names and an old Jewish treaty tradition, which makes Japhet the ancestor of Greeks, Slavs, Teutons, Dravidians. See Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews. Iapetus is associated with 11th century theologian Yaheth Matthew Poole and more recently by John Pearman Brown. The Bible, Genesis 9:27, may God enlarge Japheth, and let him live in Shem's tents, and let Canaan be his servant. Atlas itself, according to Plato's Critias text, was the king and first son of the founder of Atlantis, Poseidon. In this mountain lived an ancient human named Evenor, and he had a wife named Leucippe, and they had their only daughter called Cleito. The girl had already reached maturity when her father and mother died, Poseidon falling in love with her and having sex with her, and breaking the land, covering the hills where she lives all round, making the alternate zone of sea and land bigger and smaller, circling each other. There are 2 earths and 3 waters, which he ignites by puncturing them, each of which has a perimeter far in all directions. The center, so that no one can get to the island, for ships and shipping does not yet exist. He himself, being the master, found no difficulty in making special arrangements for the central island, brought 2 springs from beneath the earth, one warm water and the other cold, and made every variety of food grow abundantly from the land. He also raised 5 pairs of twin boys, and dividing the island of Atlantis into 10 parts, he gave to the firstborn. Fix his mother's dwelling and the ration around it, which is the greatest and the best, and make him king over the rest. The other he made princes, and gave them power over many people, and large territories. And he named them all. The oldest, who was the first king, was called Atlas, and after him all the islands and seas were called Atlantic. Atlantic in ancient Greek means, island Atlas. Let us examine his story above in the words of Poseidon. The Sundaland Continent is a continent that has 3 large islands as mentioned by the plateau, namely the island which now forms the islands of Sulawesi, Java, Sumatra and Kalimantan, which used to be one unit and one Sahul continent, which is now Australia. On the island of Poseidon is what Plato told, and today about that word still exists in Sundanese culture with the words Pasundan. Atlas itself according to Plato's Critias text is the king and the first son of the founder of Atlantis, Poseidon, Pasundan. Note again about, in this mountain lived an ancient human born named Evenor, and he had a wife named Lusup, and they have only daughter who is called Cleito. There is a similarity in the name of the daughter of the Evenor marriage, with Lusup namely Cleito and Cheeto building. The similarity with the sacred Cheeto or Setha building is located in Duku Setha, Gumung village, Genoa district, Karanganyar Regency, Central Java province. It is said that the name Setha, which in Javanese means clear, is used as the name of the hamlet where the Setha building is located because from Setha hamlet people can clearly go in various directions. To the north there is a view of Karanganyar and Solo city against the backdrop of Mount Merbabu and Merapi and, further afield, the summit of Mount Suming. To the west and east, you can see green hills stretching out, while to the south you can see the back and children of Mount Lau. The Setha building is a group of buildings consisting of 11 terraces that stretch east-west. The first terrace is located on the east side, the higher it gets to the west. Each terrace is connected by a door and a path that seems to divide the patio yard into 2 sides. On the east side of the lowest terrace there is a gate which is the gate of the Setha building complex. In front of the gate there is a stone statue called the Nyai Gamong Aram statue. On the south side of the first terrace there is a building without walls that stands on a foundation about 2 meters high. Inside the building there is an arrangement. At the western end of the path that crosses the first terrace yard is a stone archway with stone steps. The stairs to the next terrace are flanked by a pair of statues of Nyai Agni. Only one of the 2 statues is still somewhat intact, that is, it still has a head. On the second terrace, there is a stone arrangement that spreads out in the courtyard, forming an image of an eagle flying with wings spread. On the back of the eagle there is a stone arrangement depicting a turtle. Right above the head of the Garuda is a stone arrangement in the shape of a shining sun, isosceles triangle and Kalachakra, male genitalia. At the end of each of the eagle wings are 2 other forms of the sun. Garuda is Vishnu's vehicle bird which symbolizes the world above, while the turtle which is the incarnation of Vishnu is a symbol of the underworld. Turtles are considered powerful animals capable of diving into the ocean to get water of life Tirtha Amrita. The presence of Kalachakra on this page causes the Setha building to be called a Lanong, male temple. The sun shines 7 symbolizing the sun which is believed to be the source of life force. The isosceles triangle represents the guide for a world sinking into a sea of darkness. In the center of the isosceles triangle is a circle containing 3 frogs, each facing a different angle. In each triangle there is a painting of a lizard. On the heavy line dividing the east side there is a crowned eel with a crab on the south side and mimi, a type of sea animal, on the north side. The whole form is a picture of hope for fertility, both soil and human fertility. The triangle with the male genital shape at the top symbolizes the unity of woman and man, 2 beings that are opposite in nature but inseparable from each other as a symbol of the small universe, microcosm, within humans. On the west side of the second terrace, each on the left and right of the stairs leading to the next terrace, you can see two rooms that only have the foundation left. The stairs to the next terrace are andesite stones, which are not neatly arranged. On the left and right of the stairs, there are stone ruins that are not clearly visible. The third terrace is a yard that is not too wide. As found on the previous terrace, on the west side of this terrace there are also a couple of rooms that flank the path leading to the stairs to a higher terrace. In the room there is a stone arrangement forming a rectangle stretching from north to south. On the stone walls, there are reliefs depicting people and animals. It is said that the relief is an excerpt from the Kidung Sudamala. Relief with the theme Kidung Sudamala is also found in the Suku building. This relief reinforces the notion that the Setha building was built for Ruwadan purposes. The stairs leading to the next terrace are made of andesite, which is very neatly arranged, made of terraces with a fairly wide landing at each level. The cliffs around and to the right of the stairs are supported by stacked stone sheet piles. Information was not obtained whether this ladder was the result of a previous renovation or was an original ladder. On the inner west side of the fourth terrace, there are a pair of statues of Bhima guarding a stone staircase leading to the fifth terrace. The fifth terrace is a courtyard with a pair of roofed buildings, called the outer pendapa. The building without walls flanks the road leading to the stairs to the sixth terrace. On the west side of the sixth terrace, at the foot of the stairs, there is a Kalachakra statue and a pair of Ganesha statues. The stairs to the seventh terrace are also very neatly arranged and are made of 3 levels. The cliffs on the left and right of the stairs are reinforced with stone sheeting. At the top of the stairs is a gate which is the entrance to the seventh terrace, which is a courtyard surrounded by stone walls. Similar to the outer pendapa, on this terrace there is also a pair of roofed pendapa without walls. This terrace is called the Pendapa Dalam. On the west side of the inner hall, there are stairs leading to the next terrace. The eighth terrace is a room used for prayer. In front of the door of the room are 2 stone statues with writing. On the west side, at the back of the room, were the stairs leading to the ninth terrace. On the left and right of the west side of the ninth terrace there is a room facing east. The 2 rooms functioned as a storage area for ancient objects. On the east side, opposite each of the storage rooms were 2 buildings. The building on the north side contains the Sabdapalan statue and the south side contains the Nyagengong statue. Both of them were figures of Punakawan, caregivers and advisors of the kingdom, at that time. The west side of the ninth terrace is bordered by a stone wall that serves as a gate to enter a passage of stone stairs leading to a room on the 10th terrace. On each side of this room there are 3 wooden buildings facing each other. In each building there is a statue. One of the rows of statues located in the north row is a statue. In the southern row, again, there is a Kalachakra statue. The western end of the south row is the storage area for Umpu Supa's heirloom. Umpu Supa was an Umpu heirloom weapon maker, who was well known and respected during his lifetime. The west side of the 10th terrace is bordered by a stone wall that serves as a gate to enter a stone stairway leading to the 11th terrace. At the top of the hall there is a stone wall about 1.60 meters high that divides the stairs from the main room, in the form of a roofless building surrounded by stone walls almost 2 meters high, with an area of about 5 square meters. This main room is located higher than all other rooms, so that from this place can be seen clearly the spaces below. The main Setha building is located in the very backyard and on the highest terrace facing the top of the mountain. This reflects the belief that the sacredness of the building is part of the natural surroundings. Setha building architecture is based in the concept that the gods do not reside in the sky, but on the top of the mountain. Mountains are the visible and invisible source of energy. Whereas the main building of this temple is precisely located at the topmost backyard, is different from the concept of ancient stone buildings in general, which places the front space as the center of all activities, similar to that found in Panataran, Blatar. In the far west of the Setha building complex, on a rather high plain, there is a sendong, or pool where the king's concubines and their maids bathe. The Setha building is closely related to Suku, which is relatively close together. Suku is located on the lower ground when compared to Setha. We already know that the source of the story that Plato got was the main source written in stone, which was obtained from the ancient priest in Egypt. The Egyptian civilization was a civilization that developed and had the main source in the archipelago, namely the Lemurian civilization. In the Atlantis era that developed in the land of the archipelago at the end of the Lemurian period, the story of Poseidon and Cleito is the story of the predecessors in the archipelago. The name Chetho is identical to Plato's version of Cleito. And in the depiction of the Chetho building, it clearly describes the noble relationship between two types of human beings, namely men and women, as the source of life. Returning to the discussion of Atlantis and the source of its ancestors who later inhabited the archipelago as the traditional folk who were recorded and rewritten by Plato, as the nation of Atlantis. Nimrod, Enum. Ard, Hebrew. Modern Nimrod, Tiberian Nimrod, Aramaic. Arabic. Namrud, king of Shinar. According to the book of Genesis and the Chronicles, son of Cush and great-grandson of Noah. The first mention of Nimrod is in the Table of Nations. He is described as the son of Cush, grandson of Ham, and great-grandson of Noah, and as a mighty on earth, and mighty hunter before God. In the Hebrew and Christian traditions, Nimrod is considered the leader of those who built the Tower of Babel in the land of Shinar. According to Frank Joseph, the author of the book, The Atlantis Encyclopedia, there are several similarities between the Adites and the Atlanteans, including 1. The Aad were famous for their city with high pillars. According to Plato, Atlanteans had a tradition of sacrificing animals in front of pillars. 2. The Aad had giant physiques similar to the description of the Atlanteans. 3. The Adites Aad are said to be the oldest inhabitants of Saudi Arabia. The Atlantis as described by Plato was destroyed about 11,000 years ago. 4. The Adites Aad are often described as red-haired, and this is similar to the mythological descriptions of Atlantis in several places such as in Egypt, Ireland, Winnebago. 5. The Adites Aad had 10 kings who ruled several places all over the world simultaneously. This is similar to the story of the 10 kings of Atlantis according to Plato's description in the Critias text. 6. The Adites arrived in Saudi Arabia after leaving the place of the Aad people who were devastated by a violent wind from a black cloud. This may be similar to the Atlantis disaster. A very majestic capital has been punished by God for the evil of its inhabitants by the terrible flood. The story of Ad is recorded in the pre-Islamic tradition, and it is also mentioned in the Quran that God cursed the people for building high places for nothing. The Adites are said to have worshipped the sun by forming the top of the pyramid. This practice led more to the teachings and life of Atlantis. This area is also known as the City of Pillars, or Land of Bronze. Plato described them as the pillars of Atlantis, while their city was a very advanced city before it was destroyed. It is also said to be very advanced for the bronze trade, in its time. In the Arabic tradition, the Adites are depicted as giants, titanium Atlantis in Greek mythology, superior architects and builders who have been able to lift large stones. Unmatched even today, the rural tribes of Saudi Arabia regard ancient ruins of extraordinary size as the buildings of the Adites, and consider their ancestors Ad at a very earlier age. In the 19th century, the king of the Mussulman tribe kingdom was Shed Ad ben Ad, or descendant and son of Ad. The ancestor of the Arab nation was Ad, the grandson of the biblical Ham. The Adites are still considered to be the earliest inhabitants of Arabia. They are referred to as red men, for their hair color. Some Atlantean records, Egyptian, Irish, Winnebago, describe Atlantis, at least in part, as a redhead. The Adites had 10 kings in different parts of the world simultaneously, the same number and disposition. Described by Plato in his Atlantean account, Critias. The Adites arrived in the area after the former were wiped out by a very large black cloud with the ferocity of its storms. Several records of geological history are clearly recorded regarding the accompanying volcanic eruptions. Destruction of Atlantis. Ad is still the name of a Semitic tribe in Hadramut province, Saudi Arabia, whose ancestors claimed descent from their ancestors as Noah's grandson. Ignatius Donnelly, an author of the book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, states several similarities between the Adites Aad and Atlanteans, among others. 1. Are the predecessors of a very old age. 2. Giant. 3. Likes to make large and tall buildings. 4. Likes to worship celestial objects such as the sun, stars, etc. 5. The word Adites is close to the word Adityas, which is a group of Indian gods, and this Adityas can be associated with the Titans, a group of Greek gods where one of them is Atlas, the first king of Atlantis. Generations of Noah's children. Shem, Ham, and Japhet, and they were the children born after the flood. Can we not assume that the three sons represented the three great races on earth? The Genesis account claims that the Phoenicians were descended from Ham, whereas the Hebrews were descended from Shem. We find Hebrew and Phoenician united by common linguistic ties, common traditions, and common racial characteristics. The Jews were world merchants 18 centuries after Christ, just as Phoenicians were world merchants 15 centuries before Christ. In addition, Arabs, popularly classified as Semites, or sons of Shem, claim in their tradition that they are descended from Ad, son of Ham. Written in the 10th chapter of Genesis, they are among the descendants of Ham, calling them Seba, Hawilah, Rama. If the two large are called Semitic stocks, Phoenician and Arab, Hamites, it must be the third member of the group belonging to the same race. If the Jews also recognize a branch of the Hamitic racial roots, then we are referring to the Semitic race, which is Turanian, including Etruscans, Finnish, Tartars, Mongols, Chinese, and Japanese. Second, the Hamitic family races, the Red Race, including the Ethiopians, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Hebrews, Berbers. Third, Japhetic descent with whiter skin, including Greeks, Italians, Celts, Goths, and those who wrote Sanskrit other words, the entire Aryan family. If we add the three descendants of this race of Negroes, which cannot be traced back to Atlantis, and do not include, according to Genesis, among the descendants of Noah, we have four descendants, which are white, red, yellow, and black, recognized by the Egyptians as all. There seems to be some doubt for the Semitic race. It is a different racial class because it is both Semitic and Hamites. As, for example, Sheba and Hawilah, the Mash, or Messic, race is classified between the sons of Shem and the children of Japhet. If Arya is of the Japhetic race, and if Japhet is one of the Patriarch's sons who escaped the flood, then surely, if the Genesis tradition is true, Arya came from the submerged land, namely, Atlantis. And Atlantis is the former Indonesian archipelago. According to Genesis, the descendants of Japhet who escaped the flood with Noah were the Ionians, the inhabitants of Morea, the inhabitants of the coast of Cilicia, Asia Minor, the Cyprians, the Macedonian Dodonenes, the Iberians, and the Thracians. These are all recognized today as Aryan, except for Iberia. In fact, there seems to be confusion from Hamitic and Semitic. This is shown in the mixture of Hamitic and Semitic inscriptions in some of the most ancient, in the facilities of the relationship between the Semites of Asia and the Hamites of Egypt, in its unobservable absorption of all the Asiatic Hamites, and the Semitic adoption of the Hamitic gods and religious systems. It is evident that, in a not long preceding period, the two families had settled together and spoke the same language. Winchell's Pre-Adamites, p. 36. Is it not more plausible to suppose that the so-called Semitic race of Genesis is only part of the Hamitic lineage, and that we should look for the great part of Noah's three sons in the Turanian race? Francis Lenormand argues that the Turanian race was descended from Magog, son of Japhet. He considered the Turanians to be intermediaries between the white and yellow races, who later became into each of them. Uzbeks, Osmanli Turks and Hungarians are not to be distinguished in appearance from the most perfect branches of the white race. On the other hand, Chons almost exactly resembles Tongauzes, who belong to the yellow race. Turanian languages are characterized by the same agglutinative characteristics found in America, Mongolia and India alike, with no bushy beards. The color of the Inca Empire was yellow. Yellow is the color of the imperial family in China. Peruvian religion is worship of the sun is God. In Peru, Pachacamac is considered a sovereign creator. Kamak Haya is the name of a Hindu goddess. Haile is a lode of each verse of the song composed praising the sun and the Incas. Mr. John ranking comes from the word Allah, from the word Haile, also the word hallelujah. The 60-year cycle is used between most of the countries of East Asia, and between the Muiscas of the highlands of Bogotá. Hipu, a wire-tied computation, is used in Peru and in China. Bancroft, Native Races, Volume 5, p. 48. In Peru and China, both use hieroglyphs, which are read from top to bottom. It seems most obvious to me, said Humboldt, that monuments, methods of calculating time, the cosmogony system, and the many myths of America, offer striking analogies to ideas from an Asian East analogy that suggests ancient communication, and not only the result of the uniform conditions under which all nations were found at the beginning of civilization. Crit. Tom. E. p. 68. In Cambodia's devastated cities, which are further east than Burma, recent research has found Theoculus is in Mexico, and the remains of temples of the same type and pattern of those of the Yucatan. And when we reach the sea, we meet in Suku, in Java, a teocalli which is completely synonymous with Tehuantepec. Mr. Ferguson said, as we advance eastward from the Euphrates Valley, at every step we encounter art forms becoming more and more like those of Central America, builders of Babylon, p. 88. Prescott said, the coincidence is strong enough to authorize the belief that the Anahuac civilization was to some degree influenced by that of East Asia, and, second, that the difference is like to bring back communication for a very long time. Mexico. Volume 3, p. 418. All Appearances. Continued Lenormand, Ancient History of the East, Volume I. p. 64, would lead us to regard the Turanians as the first branch of the Japhet family to go out into the world, and by premature separation, by being isolated and antagonistic, taking, or rather preserved, completely different physiognomy as this kind of imperfect white race developed. We might consider this yellow race to be the first and the oldest of Atlantis and therefore, the farthest reaches of the same source. Then came the Hamitic race, then none other than the descendants of the Japhetic race. Continues to Part 3. By Santo Saba.